weather is still against us. When can the bombers fly?
Not before morning, sir. The fog is too thick over the channel.
The air inside the supreme headquarters of the Allied Expeditionary Force was thick with cigarette smoke and tension on the morning of August 1st, 1944. While the history books often place these meetings in grand palaces like Versailles, at this specific moment, the command centers were still in transition, tactical tents and trailers struggling to keep up with the war. General Dwight D. Eisenhower stood over a sprawling map table, the paper edges curled from humidity and constant handling. He looked exhausted. The deep lines etched into his face told the story of the last 2 months, 60 days of grinding, brutal warfare in the hedgerows of Normandy. The map before him was a puzzle that refused to be solved. For weeks, the Allied forces, British, American, and Canadian, had been measuring their progress in yards, not miles. They were fighting through the bocage, a nightmare landscape of ancient, thick hedges that turned every open field into a kill box for German machine guns and concealed Panzer tanks. The stalemate was suffocating. The casualty lists were growing longer every morning, and the brilliant German defense seemed unbreakable. But the atmosphere in the room was shifting. Something new was happening on the map. General Omar Bradley, the commander of the 12th Army Group, pointed a pencil at the western sector of the front. The tedious grind was over. Operation Cobra, the massive American breakout attempt launched a week prior, had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. A concentrated carpet bombing campaign had blown a hole in the German lines near Saint-Lô, and now the armor was pouring through. But the question remained, how do we exploit this? How do we turn a breach in the line into a rout? Eisenhower needed a commander who wouldn't just push through the door, but would kick it off its hinges. He needed aggressiveness. He needed speed. He needed the Third Army. On paper, the Third Army had officially become operational at 12 p.m. on August 1st. Its commander was a man who had been sitting on the sidelines in disgrace and frustration for months, serving as a decoy while others fought. Lieutenant General George S. Patton, Jr. As the briefing continued, a liaison officer hurried into the room, clucking a message from the newly activated Third Army. The officer hesitated before handing it to Eisenhower, aware of the absurdity of the content. Eisenhower took the paper, his eyes scanning the typed text. He blinked, adjusted his glasses, and read it again. His expression shifted from the intense concentration of a strategist to the bewildered disbelief of a sane man witnessing madness. He looked up at Bradley. "He can't be serious," Eisenhower muttered, his voice low. He read the message aloud to the silent room. Patton was reporting that his Third Army was not just advancing, they were practically flying. The message detailed a plan to drive south into Brittany, secure the entire peninsula within 4 days, a distance of nearly 100 miles, and then pivot 90 degrees to race east toward Paris. He was requesting permission to continue this advance as far as his fuel supplies would allow, effectively disregarding the standard operating procedure of securing supply lines before moving forward. Bradley, usually the calm and steady GI's general, looked shocked. The Brittany Peninsula was a massive stretch of rugged terrain, heavily defended by German paratroopers in fortified ports like Brest, Lorient, and Saint-Nazaire. To suggest capturing it in 4 days was tactical insanity. It defied every rule of logistics. "Sir," Bradley said, "that's impossible. No army can move that fast. The logistics alone will collapse. He'll outrun his communications, his food, and his gas." Eisenhower held up a hand, silencing the room. He picked up the secure field telephone. "Get me Third Army headquarters. I need to speak with General Patton immediately." When Patton's voice crackled over the line minutes later, it was high-pitched and vibrating with energy. Eisenhower skipped the pleasantries. "George," he said, "I'm looking at your proposed movement plan. You are planning to advance 100 miles in 4 days, through enemy territory, with limited fuel, against organized German resistance." There was a pause on the line, followed by Patton's confident drawl. "That is correct, sir." Eisenhower rubbed his temples. "George, that is logistically impossible. You'll leave your flanks wide open." Patton cut him off. "Sir, the Germans are in chaos. Their lines are collapsing. They don't know where we are, and half the time we don't know where we are. If we move fast, I mean truly fast, we can take Brittany before they even realize we've broken through. But we have to move now. We have a 48-hour window where the enemy is disorganized. If we wait for the supply trucks to catch up, we lose that window. Give me permission to go. I'll worry about the supplies later." Eisenhower closed his eyes. Every doctrine he had ever been taught at West Point screamed that this was a mistake. You do not outrun your supply lines. You do not advance faster than your logistics can support. You consolidate, you build depots, and then you advance methodically. But Eisenhower also knew that methodical warfare was what had kept them trapped in the hedgerows for 2 months. Patton was offering a gamble, a high-stakes roll of the dice. "All right, George," Eisenhower exhaled smoke. "You have permission to advance. But listen to me. If you run out of fuel and get your boys cut off, it's on your head." Patton's voice came back almost laughing. "I won't get stuck, Ike. Third Army, out." The line went dead. Eisenhower hung up the phone and looked at the map. "He's going to overextend," Bradley warned quietly. "Maybe," Eisenhower replied, staring at the blue arrow representing Patton's forces. "Or maybe he'll do something no one thought possible." The breakout that followed, from August 1st to August 31st, would become the stuff of legend. It began at a town called Avranches. Avranches was the bottleneck, the gateway from Normandy into the wider French countryside. If the Germans could hold Avranches, they could bottle the Americans up. But Patton didn't give them the chance. He poured 7 divisions through a road network meant for 2. He stood at the crossroads himself, a pearl-handled revolver on his hip, directing traffic like a mad policeman, screaming at trucks and tanks to keep moving. "Don't stop," he bellowed. "If you stop, you become a target. Keep moving." The Third Army surged into the open country of Brittany like water bursting through a dam. Patton's orders to his division commanders were simple and terrifying. Bypass resistance. If you hit a German strongpoint, don't stop to fight it. Go around it. Leave it for the infantry coming up behind. Your job is to drive deep into the enemy rear and create chaos. His tank commanders were stunned by the relentless pace. They advanced 20 miles the first day, 30 the second. By the third day, they were covering 40 miles of ground from dawn to dusk. The German 7th Army, already reeling from the bombardment of Operation Cobra, was thrown into absolute confusion. They could not form a defensive line, because by the time they drew a line on a map, Patton's Sherman tanks were already 20 miles past it. The German High Command was asking the same question over and over. Where is Patton? They didn't know because Patton was moving too fast to be tracked. The speed was intoxicating, but it came with a price. By August 3rd, the reality of physics and logistics began to catch up with the Third Army. At a temporary headquarters near Rennes, Patton's quartermaster approached him, looking pale and worried. "Sir, we have a problem," the officer said. "It's fuel. The supply trucks are stuck in the traffic jams back at Avranches. At our current rate of consumption, the tanks will be dry in 36 hours. Patton didn't blink. He was shaving, staring into a small mirror hung on a tree branch. "Then make the fuel last 36 hours, he said, wiping soap from his face. "After that, we capture German fuel depots and use their gas." The quartermaster stammered. "Sir, relying on captured fuel that's not standard logistics." Patton turned, razor in hand. "The Germans have fuel. We'll take it. In the meantime, cut the allocations to non-combat vehicles. Every gallon goes to the tanks. The headquarters staff can walk if they have to. This army is going to keep moving even if I have to get out and push the damn tanks myself." It was logistics by improvisation. It was reckless. It was brilliant. Patton ordered his men to scavenge. They siphoned fuel from abandoned German trucks. They captured supply dumps and loaded jerry cans onto the back of their Shermans. They abandoned broken vehicles rather than waiting for repairs, and they kept moving. On August 4th, back at Schaeff, the mood had shifted from anxiety to stunned disbelief. An urgent message arrived from the Third Army. An intelligence officer marked the map with a grease pencil and stepped back. Eisenhower walked over, coffee cup in hand, and stared at the blue markers. "When was this position confirmed?" he asked. 10 minutes ago, sir," the officer replied. Eisenhower traced the line with his finger. Patton's forces were in Rennes. The 6th Armored Division was approaching the port of Brest at the far tip of the peninsula. They were over 100 miles from where they had started just 4 days prior. "That's impossible," Eisenhower whispered. "The resistance in Brittany was supposed to take weeks to clear." Bradley, standing beside him, shook his head. "He did it in 4 days. He's outrun the maps." Later that day, Eisenhower sent a cable to Patton. "Congratulations on reaching objectives ahead of schedule. Remarkable achievement. However, you are now critically low on fuel and supplies. Recommend halting to consolidate positions." Patton's reply was characteristic. "Acknowledge fuel shortage. However, intend to secure Lorient and Saint-Nazaire before Germans reinforce. We'll worry about fuel later." Eisenhower read the message and let out a tired, incredulous laugh. "He's out of gas and he wants to keep attacking," he told Bradley. "Should we order him to stop?" By every rule of military science, the answer was yes, but Patton was winning. He was winning faster than any general in the history of the war. "No," Eisenhower said finally, "let him go, but divert every available supply truck to 3rd Army. Whatever George needs, he gets priority." Then came the pivot. Having effectively neutralized Brittany, Patton did something the Germans never expected. He didn't just finish the job in the west, he turned his entire army 90 degrees. Like a massive steel door swinging on a hinge, the 3rd Army turned from facing west to facing east. They began to drive toward Paris and the Seine River. This maneuver, executing a 90-degree turn with hundreds of thousands of men and vehicles while in contact with the enemy, should have resulted in the mother of all traffic jams. But Patton's sheer force of will drove them on. They were now racing toward the heart of France. The German reaction was one of total collapse. Field Marshal Günther von Kluge, commanding the German forces in the west, looked at the reports coming into his headquarters with horror. "The Americans are everywhere," a subordinate reported. "They are in Le Mans. They are flanking us to the south. If they continue this speed, they will encircle our entire army." Von Kluge realized too late that he wasn't fighting a conventional battle. He was fighting a ghost who refused to stand still. Patton was driving along the southern flank of the German army, threatening to trap them in what would become known as the Falaise Pocket. The German retreat went into a rout. By mid-August, the 3rd Army reached the Seine River, weeks ahead of the Allied schedule. The engineers, working with the same frantic energy as their commander, built pontoon bridges under fire. Tanks floated on rafts. Infantry paddled across in captured boats. When Eisenhower received the report that Patton was crossing the Seine on August 19th, the room went silent. The original invasion plan, drafted months ago, had predicted they wouldn't reach the Seine until September. Patton had bought them a month. He had bought them thousands of lives. "Good God," Eisenhower said, staring at the map markers near Paris. "He's already there." It was a phrase that would define the campaign. But the laws of physics are absolute, and even George Patton couldn't drive tanks on hope forever. On August 25th, the momentum finally broke, not because of German panzers, but because the fuel gauges hit empty. The 3rd Army, a juggernaut that had torn across France, ground to a halt. The Red Ball Express, the massive convoy system of trucks rushing supplies from the beaches to the front, could simply not keep up with Patton's voracious appetite for gasoline. Patton's forward elements were sitting on the border of Germany, the prize within sight. The German defenses were shattered. The road to the Rhine was open, but the tanks were silent. Patton was furious. He raged in his headquarters. He called Eisenhower, begging, pleading, and threatening. "I need gas, Ike. Give me the gas. I can end this war in 10 days. The Germans have nothing left." But Eisenhower faced a terrible dilemma. To the north, Field Marshal Montgomery was preparing his own massive push, Operation Martin Garden. Supplies were limited. There wasn't enough fuel to support 2 massive thrusts simultaneously. Eisenhower had to choose. And in a decision that historians still debate today, he gave the priority to Montgomery in the north. Patton was ordered to halt. The 3rd Army sat idle. The soldiers who had felt the exhilaration of the chase now watched through binoculars as the Germans frantically dug trenches and poured concrete on the other side of the line. The window of opportunity was closing. The miracle of August was over. Patton wrote in his diary that night, a mix of heartbreak and bitter vindication. We could have crossed the Rhine. We could have been in Berlin. But we stopped. Yet nothing could erase what happened in those 30 days. The advance of the Third Army across France remains one of the greatest feats in military history. In 1 month, they had liberated a country. They had advanced faster than Napoleon, faster than the blitzkrieg tactics the Germans themselves had invented. They had proven that speed was a weapon more lethal than firepower. When the dust settled and the maps were finally updated, the world realized that General Patton had done the impossible. He had taken a stalemate and turned it into a sprint. And for one brief, shining month in the summer of 1944, he showed the world what happens when you refuse to wait for permission to win. The image of Eisenhower standing over that map, shaking his head and muttering, "Good God, he's already there," remains the enduring epitaph of that wild, unstoppable ride across France.